Hey, welcome everybody to a theory crafting build guide, and today we are looking at Amir paired with Narja and a draw engine support. So the reason why I say draw engine support is it could be Veronica, Nia, or just anybody that has good enough draw cards. So I'll be talking about the two Full Metal Hurricane builds. It's gonna be the multi-hit E5 Full Metal Hurricane and the additional hit E2 Full Metal Hurricane, which will require a bit more specific setup. So I struggled putting all of this together because there was just so many options and it's really easy to break your save file with Narja. So instead of trying to cover every possible path, I'm just going to show you my build and explain why it works and then talk about the alternatives. So this is going to be a Amir focused DPS build. Sure that there will be some damage from the other two characters, but it will try to make Full Metal Hurricane as strong as possible. So before we dive in, let me explain the two Full Metal Hurricane builds. So we have the E5 multi-hit. I like to call this the multi-hit Full Metal Hurricane, and this decreases your metalization stacks by 2, which gives you an additional 2 more hits per metalization stack you decrease, so for a total of 5 hits. It's a 2 AP cost, which is expensive, but it is the bread and butter DPS Amir card. And among the two builds, I would recommend this particular build because it's a lot easier than the other one. So the other one is the E2 additional hit Full Metal Hurricane. So for one turn, you get an additional hit to your metalization. So if you cast 4 copies of Full Metal Hurricane with this, then that's going to be 4 extra hits on your next metalization trigger. You'll also get the 50% metalization bonus from each cast, so 4 copies of this will give you an additional 200% more metalized damage. So combine this with the Shackles of Hunger E5, which Narja has, allows you to cast shields 4 times in one card. You're looking at 20 hits. The problem with this additional hit Full Metal Hurricane is that you need 8 AP to cast 4 copies of it, so the only real enabler for this is really Nia with Adagio and Eternal Hunger for AP generation and card draw. So I don't have a proper save file for both Amir and Nia for this showcase, but if you want to build this, I'll show you the cards that you need for both Nia and Amir so that you can get this working for yourself. So this is the cards that Nia has. You always want to remove the 3 basic cards, and you only really need Adagio here with the Epiphany 1. This is so that you can discard 2 Eternal Hunger from your deck and then draw it again to draw 2 cards and also to get 2 AP. And G card is actually really strong here because it can activate the top card of your draw pile for a lucky Full Metal Hurricane cast for free. And in the next season, we can remove a lot more cards, so you can remove Mute Accent and Soul Reap if it's not useful enough. Mute Accent does have an Epiphany where you can, for 1 cost, you can cast the lowest cost card in your hand. So you could actually manipulate this by having just Mute Accent and Full Metal Hurricane in your hand and then just use it to cast, but at that point it's kind of pointless because you don't have a shield card to activate Metalize. So for Amir, you kind of just want to have 4 copies of E2 Full Metal Hurricane. You also want to make sure that you have enough metalization sources, so going for a hovering metal upgrade is very useful here. Even the metal pierce that gives you metalization instead of consuming it is good too. You also want to have metal extraction to give you the metalization damage. And of course, you want to remove your 3 basic cards. I wouldn't really keep Steel Barrier because you are unlikely going to have the AP to cast it. Compared to Narja's card where it is 0 cost, Steel Barrier, although it does give you back 1 metalize if you have the potentials for it, I think that 1 AP is still going to be quite expensive when you're going to spend 8 AP on Full Metal Hurricane. So for this build, Narja is really simple. You just want to go for Shackles of Hunger E5 where you get 4 shield casts in 1 card. Of course, you need to have the Voracity to maintain it, so you want to go for Voluntary Control E1. I really don't think there's a better option in this. For Bottomless Hunger, the E4 does affect the metalization damage, so you want to go for that. Since Domain of Voracity E2 is a debuff on the enemy, I would just assume that it does increase your metalization hits, so you should go for that one as well. I should also mention that Voracity only activates when you use an attack card, so Metalize doesn't actually benefit from this. So now let's go on to the build that I am using, which is the Full Metal Hurricane E5. So for Amir's cards, it's quite simple really. You just want to have Full Metal Hurricane E5. You can duplicate it once or twice, but realistically you won't have enough AP to cast this unless you have the Divine Epiphany to give you 1 AP or a Divine Epiphany that reduces the cost of Full Metal Hurricane to 1. Hovering Metal is better off being the upgrade card so that at the start of the turn that you get 1 metalization. If you have E6 Amir, you get 2 metalization at the start of the turn. This is really good for your upkeep as long as you're using 1 Full Metal Hurricane every turn, and henceforth if you are trying to duplicate Full Metal Hurricane, then you probably need a bit more metalization engine sources, and that's where you will want to have Metal Pierce that gives you 2 metallization instead of consuming. So among the 5 epiphany that Metal Pierce have, I would favor E3 over the rest. Now E4 could be really useful because Narja does heal from Voracity, but most of the time you have to use an attack card to activate Voracity, which will then reduce the cost of Metal Pierce. And so I would say that it's quite unreliable, and more so I would go back to saying that we could use the metallization for Full Metal Hurricane, which is our big damage. Now for metal extraction, I would say it doesn't really matter. It's mostly for metallization gain. So you can use Celestial if you are not going to reduce the cost of any of your cards, because Narja has this one card where she does reduce the cost of a card. So if you're using that, you don't want a Celestial version because number 1, it is a Celestial card. It will activate from when you cast a 2-cost card, and if you reduce the cost of your 2-cost card to 1 or 0, it will not activate it. And number 2 is you don't want your Celestial card to have a reduced cost when it's going to be activated automatically anyway. So I will go against E4 if you are using Bottomless Hunger for Narja that reduces the cost of cards. If you're not and you have Divine Epiphany AP from other sources, then I would say that this could be a good option as well. Otherwise, I would just use any of these that gives you metallization. Now, going to Narja is a bit more complicated here because Narja is the enabler for this build, and she can also break your safe out if you're not quite careful. Here's the thing about Voracity is that it drains per hit per enemy. So if you have 3 enemies on the board, and you're hitting 5 times with Full Metal Hurricane, that's gonna be 15 Voracity stacks that you need for all 5 hits to gain the damage boost. So that's nearly impossible to maintain, so I wouldn't really look at Voracity and Predation for the damage boost. But then when it comes to single target bosses, Voracity is gonna be easier to sustain because you only need 5 Voracity stacks for that 5 hits. So the other thing to understand about is Voracity versus morale. So if Voracity stacks gets drained really quickly, then morale would probably be better here, right? But the difference is the Voracity gets affected by all your generic card multipliers. So if your card does 100% and you have Voracity giving you 40%, so you're doing 140% damage, but your generic card multiplier comes in and you will do, let's say it does 50% more, you do 210%. So with morale buff though, if you have 2 stacks of morale, it gives you 40%. But if you have the generic multiplier here, it will multiply your 100% first, giving you a 150% damage total, and then you add the morale at the end, which is 40% after. So it's a 210% from Voracity versus a 190% from morale. You do lose a little bit of damage here. It does get a bit more depending on how much of your multiplier is, but also Voracity is technically better damage here, but morale is still reliable for multi-hit AoE because it just doesn't drain at all. So for me, I would still stick to trying to get Voracity over trying to get morale, because once again, on the boss is a lot easier to maintain. Also because Voracity can heal you, so on the higher floors, when you take the damage, it's still very important for you to try and survive. So now that we have established Voracity for Narja, let's talk about her cards. So starting out with Domain of Voracity, always go for E2 because it is more damage. There's no real alternative here except you can go for E5 if you're unlucky, because that is an upgrade card and it could thin out your deck. But E2 is the priority for damage wise. So Bottomless Hunger is where it really enables Amir's build. E1 is what I run, so every time you use Voracity, it reduces the cost of 1 random card in your hand and it triggers for the next 2 Voracity. So what I like about this is that it gives you 3 Voracity stacks, and then it also helps you to afford more Full Metal Hurricane casts, or even other buffs like your Domain of Voracity, which already costs 1, and Voluntary Control, which will also cost another 1, leaving you with only 1 AP for Full Metal Hurricane. You could also go for E4 if you find that you have enough Divine Epiphany giving you 1 AP, then E4 giving you 100% defense-based damage is honestly really strong for Full Metal Hurricane that hits 5 times. It's important to note that E2 Domain of Voracity and E4 Bottomless Hunger does not stack at all. I have tested this for Bottomless Hunger, but I don't have Domain of Voracity 2 times to know, but I've done some research and people say that it just goes up in turns. So general rule of thumb is when it says for 1 turn, if you try to use its duplicated card, it will just increase the number of turns. So the next one to get out of the way that's easiest to talk about is Voluntary Control. You can choose E1 and that gives you 9 Voracity stacks if you have 6 or less Voracity stacks to begin with. If it always gave you Voracity, and then if you had more than 6 Voracity, it would give you 3 Predation situation, I would say that this is a really strong card. So if you choose E4 or E5 Shackles of Hunger, which we're going to talk about next, it will consume Voracity stacks here. So you have to make sure that you use Shackles of Hunger first so you can drain the Voracity stacks, and then use Voluntary Control to gain back the Voracity stacks for your Full Metal Hurricane to do damage. I do prefer E1, which is the Attunement. When I have this card and every time I draw it, I just get 6 stacks, is the most reliable Voracity generator, more so than Voluntary Control, at least for me, because you don't have to use 1 AP to use it. So it becomes very cost friendly to the Full Metal Hurricane build, which is very expensive. But if you don't need to heal and you want to go full damage, then I would recommend E4 because it gives you 200% more damage on your next Full Metal Hurricane cast, and you also get 3 predation. So if you have the Voracity stacks with it, you're gonna get another 140% more for your first 3 hits. And if you have Bottomless Hunger, that gives you another 100%, and Domain of Voracity, that gives you another 100%. It is a big chunk of damage that you're gonna get on Full Metal Hurricane. It is important to note that it's only for your next attack card use though. I haven't really tested this, but I wonder if every turn you use it, you can kind of stack it for your next attack card. But if you're using Veronica, it probably would trigger on the Ballista instead. So let me quickly show you guys my save file for my characters, starting with Veronica because she's very easy to talk about. It is an old save file from December last year, and I do have the Tentacles of Chaos, which increases my attack. The defense base damage does take from some of the attack damage, so it does help a bit here. I would say that my save file is pretty lackluster here. You kind of want 0 cost repos 4 times, but I have this one card which is really in the way of things because it's giving me 120% shield. It is consuming metallization stacks, and I don't really want that because we want to keep it for my Full Metal Hurricane. Thankfully though, I have enough metallization stacks, so this isn't really disruptive. I do have Gesture of Freedom here, so what I like to do with this card is I like to manipulate my hand to have only one AP cost skill card like Sir Kowalski in my hand. Let's not talk about the upgrades. You would never want to use this for your upgrades. It's a big waste. Let's say I have another skill card that is 1 cost. What I would do is I would use that skill card and then I'll use Gesture of Freedom when Sir Kowalski is the only card in my hand. Precision Aim is there because I was trying to use it with Eternal Hunger back then for Great Rift. I am using it because I have Eternal Hunger on my Amir, but what you really want for Veronica is Divine Epiphany on Fire and Prep that gives you 1 morale, repose with 1 AP. If you have the Divine Epiphany on Sir Kowalski that reduces the cost of it to 0, then I would say it's really good as well. Obviously, you're not going to be able to afford all of these Divine Epiphanies. I'm just pointing out what would be a good option if you don't have these. You can also use Brainwave Blocking Helmet here to kind of give you a little bit of shields for your survivability. And yeah, that's it really for Veronica. Let's move on to the next character, Amir. So Amir, I have 3 Full Metal Hurricane, that one of them is the upgrade, 2 of them is the Epiphany 5. I wish I didn't have the upgrade because for 2 metallization costs, it is very useless in terms of damage wise. It is like cast and done thing, and then you get to have a little bit of damage at the end of the turn, but then I don't really like this as much. I would rather have a 3rd copy of Epiphany 5 with Full Metal Hurricane or just none at all. So I have E6 Amir, so that's why I'm getting 2 metallization stacked with this hovering upgrade, and Meta Pierce also gives me 2 metallization. So I have Eternal Hunger here, which pairs well with the Precision Aim. Now equipment wise, I'm using the Mutant Predator Spike because I'm getting all these damage increase, but I would like to have a generic card multiplier, which was really nice to have the Confiscation as well with the 1 AP Divine Epiphany on it. I would probably remove Shell Forming Cell. I had this because I thought I was going to do the multi-hit build, but it's been there and I couldn't find a removal event, so it's just there right now. Okay, now we talk about my Narja build. Let's take a look at it right. And I have the Divine Epiphany that reduces the cost of my shackles, which unfortunately did not get E1. I did get the Neutral Epiphany, which gives me 2 morale. So earlier I did compare the 2 because of this. Like, I would rather have the Voracity stacks again. I would rather have the Voracity stacks because I could use it for so many things. So I should also mention that morale does affect everything, including your metallization. So since Voracity is useless for the additional hit build earlier, we could actually use morale there to increase the damage for our metallization. And for my save file, I think that if I were to change things around, I would like my Shackles of Hunger to actually be E4. Either one of these could be E4 where I'm getting the 200% extra damage, or both of these could be E4. I think just having 1 copy is enough. I don't need 2 copies if I was doing E4 Shackles of Hunger, because 2 copies of Bottomless Hunger here is already enough to give me 6 Voracity. Voluntary Control would actually need to be the E1 rather than the Neutral Epiphany here. so that way I can get 9 Voracity stacks rather than just a 6 for that 1 AP. My domain of Voracity is pretty lucky. I got the E2, which increases my damage. My confiscation got 1 AP Divine Epiphany, which is really nice. So I also found this on my lab 0 recently. I actually don't really like my disposable ego. So most of the time Mealtime's already in my hand or the cost of it's already 0, so it doesn't really play into it. And another thing is that most of my cards are 0 cost, so I'm gonna draw 1 for 1 AP. It's really bad, but with confiscation giving me 1 AP and drawing forbidden cards, I would say that it kind of like evens out there. You could argue that Portrait of Furry is actually better because it, at minimum, it's probably gonna draw you 2 cards, but it does consume your Voracity stack, so do take note of this. So yeah, I wouldn't advise anyone to copy my save file exactly, because what I have is pretty much just thrown together during a roguelike, which is, I feel like everybody's save file is gonna look a bit different. And so this theory crafting video with sort of me just going through every single epiphanies kind of should have just given you an idea of what you can do to make use of what you have and to make it work for you. Now the rest of the video is just me going through floors 50 to 45, and it's actually a pretty long video here, which honestly would have been 45 minutes if I didn't fast forward it. So what I would just want to show to everybody is that it's very possible to just use Amir in this current game mode only because we are getting the buff that increases our defense base damage by 100%. I believe this is multiplicative because it says by 100% rather than plus 100%. So I would say that Amir here, because of that, is just a lot more stronger than she should have been. So for my current setup, what I'm really doing is I'm always trying to use up all my upgrades as early as possible, and I'll just prioritize them to just kind of thin out my entire draw pile. So as you guys watch the entire run, you just have to notice that my Voracity stacks is mostly going to be remaining at 0. There's never a time where I would have like more Voracity than I can actually expand out. Also, you would notice that Veronica actually does a crap ton of damage here. That is because Veronica has the 200% reload multiplier, which is gonna go crazy if you have Voracity plus Predation. So honestly, for this build, I would say it's quite the glass cannon. I don't really have a lot of shield generators. We're really relying on Voracity and Mealtime to kind of heal ourselves. You will notice that I only have 1700 health, which is really low in hindsight. And I would say that Iron Skin and Amir's manifestation ego was what kind of helped us kind of clutch through and survive. I think that at higher floors, I would have to perfect this deck even more. So this boss is really easy. You just need to kill the ads before it does a ton of damage to you. So with Full Metal Hurricane, we can actually do this really easily. So for the rest of the video, I'll just add some commentary here and there because I don't really know what to say. Probably stuff like, oh, I'm playing this card into this card. I would try my best, but most of the time it's just gonna be quite obvious of what we're trying to accomplish here, because it's just buffing up Full Metal Hurricane and then deck cycling and doing a big chunk of damage there. So we didn't need to use our Iron Skin at all here. I could have just killed the other guy and we wouldn't have taken that much damage. I think I was just trying to play it safe here. So this boss is really quite scary against like multi-hit builds, because once you reduce the number of stacks on it, it'll just switch to a strong action. It also looks really cool though, but thankfully you'll see in a bit that we actually have enough damage to just kill it in one turn. This is a really annoying fight because if you try to focus down on the support on the right side there, you would actually take back a lot of damage. I think it does like 1000 damage to you if you try to hit it when it doesn't have its shield on it. So you can see that I try to focus it to like kind of weaken its shield. But truthfully, I think the best way to do this is to kind of focus down on Seraphon. I think that's his name, the one with the 2 swords. And once you kill that finish, you have a couple of turns to kind of kill the other one left. Thankfully with Amir's Full Metal Hurricane, there is no discrimination, so we'll just hit both of them equally and a ton of damage there. You can also kind of see how the Bottomless Hunger kind of plays in here, where it reduces the cost of my cards. And I actually think that I have enough AP for more Full Metal Hurricanes. So I clicked the wrong button here and now we have to backtrack to the correct floor. I didn't want to cut it out because I just want to show that we are doing the actual floors. Right here, I know I was going to kill this guy really quickly in wave 1, and that's why I'm just trying to cycle my deck here and get as much of my Voracity stacks as high as I can. So whenever you see me just taking a long time before I start doing damage, it's just me thinking, can I get more out of this turn? Can I get more Voracity stacks, more damage, whatever I need for the next wave? I did regret it a little bit here because I felt that I didn't need to take this unnecessary damage, but at the end, I could just heal it back in with mealtime, so I wasn't that worried. This guy is honestly one of the easiest fight that you can do because Full Metal Hurricane just hits all of them, and when they take a certain number of hits, they'll just get stunned. With Full Metal Hurricane starting out at 1 AP, if you have the Divine Epiphany, that would really make a lot of difference for how you play Amir as well. So this boss is pretty easy, pretty much just has a lot of hunger stacks, and if you just multi-hit it, you would just reduce the number of hunger stacks on it. The hunger stacks gives itself morale boost. So with multi-hits, you are just gonna be able to breeze through quite well. And with Voracity, you can kind of see how much I just heal back most of my HP I take. And now we're on the final boss for this. So this boss, one of the best thing about this is that once it hits a certain percentage of its health, it will change its action into trying to heal itself. So you can kind of manipulate this boss to change its attack action into trying to heal itself during your turn. So here I regret not using the ego skill earlier to gain the extra 2 morale. I could have done that before I casted the first Full Metal Hurricane there, so it's a little bit wasteful, but that's alright, we still kill it in the end. Something that you guys should notice is that I actually am getting more metallization than I can use. So the upgrade card, even though I said I didn't actually like it, it's still kind of useful for the extra damage that it does, because I definitely can afford it. But yeah, this is one of the easiest fights ever. So here you can see me trying to manipulate to get Gesture of Freedom into reducing the cost of Sir Kowalski. So that's why you see me use Voluntary Control first. There are times when I could have used my shell forming cell to kind of shield myself from taking all that damage, but I'm quite confident at this stage of time that mill time and Voracity hits would have just healed me to full when I need it. So these 3 coffins is honestly one of the scariest fights because he just starts out with all 3 of them trying to attack you, and so you kind of panic a little bit. And here I'm just trying to think about what I need to do to kind of reduce the damage that I'm gonna take here, because otherwise it's gonna kill me. Thankfully here that I used the manifestation ego skill and Amir's manifestation ego came out. So in this scenario, getting Iron Skin would have been really good. I wouldn't save it just for the final boss, like I would actually just use it anytime when I really need it. We also got all the ballistas that we got from the previous round where they just kind of snatch it and discard our hand, and that's why we have 4 ballistas right now. So this boss is really annoying to fight. So for me, what I would do is I'll just try to end my turn before it does its own action, because it's just gonna get another extra hit. I was quite confident that I could heal it all back fully, and that's why I just decided to tank all the damage and try to beef out my Fullmetal Hurricane as much as I can, and then go for an easy kill in the next turn. So I'm taking a long time here because I'm trying to maximize my turn as much as I can. I remember that I have anxiety, which allows me to just draw a card. Also because I want to have the more than 50% bonus from Voracity that increases my damage for my Fullmetal Hurricane. So I got really lucky here. I managed to draw mill time, which is the amount of heal that I needed for the Voracity bonus damage. I think this is now on the 70th floor, so this boss is also quite tricky for many because of its absolute invincibility, and there is a phase where it just does a ton of damage to you multi-hit. For these few floors, I would save Iron Skin just for that scenario. So the earlier waves are actually quite simple, you don't have to worry too much. Here you can see me try to use my upgrade cards to get it out of my draw pile. So I really like to use mealtime first because it gives me 4 predation, and that way I could use the predation for my Fullmetal Hurricane. But sometimes you'll notice that it just doesn't really go as planned, and I'll use a different attack card which consumes the predation. So here I can use Ballista to finish it off, which is a really easy fight, and now we are on the final boss. For this boss, I would rather prioritize to get predation up than to try and get more Voracity stacks. That's so I could do more damage with my Full Metal Hurricane. So here in this turn, he's gonna get his absolute invincibility. If he didn't, I could have just killed it in this turn, but because of the absolute invincibility, we unable to do a single damage. But as you can see here, I'm trying to use this turn to the best as I can to kind of cycle through my deck and get as much Voracity and predation as I can. And then now we're going to the next turn. Thankfully, ballistas are enough to kill it, so here we go. So yeah, that's the end of the video. If you guys have any questions about the build, or if you have any feedback about the format of this video, just let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next one.